sincerest wishes to Dr. E.V. Ramanreddy for his opening comments. I was just telling him, reminding him, remembering that the first time I met him was in 2001 when he was the director of IT. And as he was talking about the IT policy, I was just reflecting and remembering that Karnataka has come quite a long way since then. I mean, I used to be an entrepreneur then with a company called Meritrack, and I didn't even think we knew the concept of an angel investor. We went looking for investors and found finally an agriculture in Shimoga who was willing to put money in us because he thought we were an IT company. Right? And literally realized that the startup world was very different. All things that end well is well. So he ended up making some money, but I think we've come such a long way in the last 24 years or 22 years. And this is what this panel is all about. Right? About the collaborative power of an ecosystem. Again, to echo what Dr. Ramanreddy said, Venturize itself is that concept. It came together when TIE and all the sponsor partners here. It's just not sponsors. Each of our partners have played a key role in spreading the applications, in evaluating, being on the jury, providing inputs, mentoring the startups, and the journey doesn't end here. It continues from here. Actually, this is the beginning rather than the end. We're going to work with each of these startups for the next 1 year, helping them to scale their businesses, building in India, building for the world, building from Bangalore and Karnataka. So this panel is all about that, is how do you really build collaborative ecosystems, and how do you bring industry, academia, governments, startups, financial institutions all coming together to really accelerate the power of startups so that we can create more jobs, growth, the $5 trillion economy, so on and so forth. So let's jump straight in. Delighted to have a stellar lineup of panelists. We have Guruprasad, Mudlapur, who is the Joint Managing Director and CPO of Bosch. Can we have you on the stage? Thank you. We have Swapnesh Maru from who is the EVP and Chief Compliance Officer of Toyota. It's a Chiradeep Datta from Chief Operating Officer of Pratham, AG&P Pratham, and of course Venkatesh, Viswanathan, who is the Head of Ecosystem Business at Zetwerk. So a huge round of applause and thank you for joining us this evening. Once again, thank you for being a part of Venturize, and we really appreciate the support that we've got from all of you. So let's jump straight in. What we will do as a format is we have about 45 minutes, 50 minutes in this panel. We will go around the table, so to speak, and each of you share your opening comments on how you engage, of course, about the company, the innovation that you do, the way that you engage with the startup ecosystem. Right? And then let's kind of get deeper into figuring out what we really need to do to bring industry corporates and the startups together. And what do we need to do together, all of us, to really further accelerate the startup growth in Karnataka, in India, and probably we can create models here for the rest of the world as well. So can I maybe start off with you to your part?
Thank you, Madan. I think it's a pleasure to be on this stage with such a good co-panelists lined up here. I come from Bosch. I represent Bosch. I'm the Joint Managing Director and CTO for Bosch. So, for those who don't know Bosch, it's a $80 billion global MNC located in 150 odd countries. 400,000 associates work for Bosch, out of which 77,000 associates work for R&D. So that's pretty unique for us, and of late, a number that also rings a lot of, makes a lot of noise for us is the fact that we have 38,000 software engineers. So it's a company which is very, very deeply rooted in technology. We invest close to about €6 billion a year on R&D. 21 was in 2021 we invested about 6 billion euro, and it's about 6 to 8% of our turnover. So we do quite a lot of technology investments as Bosch. Locally, we are also very proud to have a company which is the largest captive engineering center outside of Germany, and virtually every Bosch product which gets into a car or any other platform sort of passes through the engineering center here. So a lot of connect to engineering, a lot of connect to technology. So that's what we learn from. You touched upon how do we look at startups, but let me give a flavor of how do we start or how do we approach innovation. Basically, we look at it with regard to S-curves. We look at the current S-curve as technologies we are working on today, which are more or less the present core topics for us. And a future S-curve as the topics where we focus on technologies for the future, which are the future core topics for us. So as you can imagine, 80 billion euro company has to focus on generating that 80 billion euro next year as well. So we do a lot of work on that, on our present core, and we put in a lot of focus on innovation there. Also, where we have to do innovation in operations, manufacturing, or products which are meant for our present core. But of course, we put equal emphasis on what we believe will be the future core technologies. For example, we are very big in mobility, so we focus a lot on mobility-related technologies, be it for clean emissions, for example, electrification or hydrogen as new fuels for the future. We do quite a lot of that. We do quite some investment today on digital mobility solutions. So we do quite a lot of investments into these areas. And coming to your question on why do we connect to startups? It's see, we have an internal platform called Growth, and this platform is focused on building entrepreneurs within Bosch. So that's a key focus that we do towards what we believe as a fundamental way of changing ourselves and bringing on more internal entrepreneurs. But at the same time, we also work a lot with startups outside. Locally, we have also engaged with multiple startups, and myself on the board of several startups which we are connected with. We connect with startups either for technology, where we can share our technology or IP, or we can get IP or technology from them. We of course connect with startups to help them scale. So, or to look at go-to-market opportunities, or to look at the new and innovative business models they may be having. We also look at how they may possibly have better ways of doing things. I mean, startups are there to solve a problem, and we also learn a lot from them. So they are agile, they are very good in, very focused in approaching the problem and solving it. So we look at how to get to know about these things and learn from them and improve ourselves. And of course, we also invest. So investment from Bosch Ventures is a part of our Startup Connect. So that would be the opening statement for me in terms of how we connect with startups.
Thank you, Guruprasad. I think that was a breathtaking spectrum of the Bosch power that you just demonstrated. So I think it's very interesting. I'll come back to you on the S-curve and what's your advice to startups here? Right? What do you want to focus on? Now, let's move to the other spectrum, literally and figuratively. We'll get to Venkatesh. Venkatesh, you are a startup, unicorn. You work with manufacturing entities. Love to hear from you. Yes.
I think, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here. Always a pleasure to be a part of it. I'm Venkatesh for all of you all. I represent a young company called Zetwerk. We're a 4-year-old company from the B2B manufacturing world. Very different from a lot of the panelists here. Like Madan said, the other end of the spectrum. The B2B world, like a lot of you all may not know, is very, very different from the B2C world, which you all encounter in your day-to-day lives. The B2C world is much more known. We're a relatively less cooler version of them. May not directly impact a lot of your lives, but indirectly are there in a lot of what you guys are doing, manufacturing stuff at the back end. When you're in the B2B business, it's very essential that you're not only working in an environment where there are multiple of these institutions that we spoke of, but you're an active part of it. That puts us in the thick and center of this particular debate of how a startup actually collaborates with governments, financial institutions, and corporates. We're not only working with companies that are big or small, whether they're domestic or international or private or public. We're there with almost all of them. And that sort of puts us in a very advantageous spot. To put a little bit more color in terms of what we actually do, Zetwerk is a 4-year-old company. We started off with a very simple agenda of contract manufacturing for large corporates as well as governments, not just in India but across the world. We span across 2 broad verticals. One is industrial, the other is the consumer universe. On the industrial side, we work across 14 different businesses. Right from oil and gas, transmission distribution, aerospace and defense, roads, railways and water, fabricating stuff for metro stations, for railway stations, for highways, right? We're there across a lot of the public infrastructure that you see. On the consumer universe side, we're manufacturing, contract manufacturing stuff like smartwatches, Bluetooth headsets, or even televisions and mixers and grinders. So that's a large spectrum across which we work. And just by the virtue of being in this particular business, we not just interact with a lot of large corporates like the folks on the panel, because they're most of our customers, whether it's a Tata Steel or a Jindal or one of these large entities. We're also actively working with a lot of government institutions because directly or indirectly they are our end customers. They're the ones for whom we're manufacturing, they're the ones for whom we're setting up this infrastructure. We also end up working with a lot of SMEs who are actually our vendors. We sort of act as a bridge between the SMEs out there across the country and in the world, between them and the large corporations and the government institutions that we're speaking of. And lastly, but not the least, with financial institutions. We work with almost 30 of them in unlocking access to capital to all of these companies, big and small, across the country. So coincidentally, my formal designation also reads Head of Ecosystem at Zetwerk. And my core mandate at Zetwerk remains unlocking the potential of these ecosystems, both internal as well as external. And one thing that we've sort of firmly believed, we're a relatively newer entity in this space. We think India has a very, very thriving ecosystem that is nurtured to put together a lot of these players together. And there are a lot of classic examples, right? You look at UPI, it's an amazing example of a public-private partnership of an institution coming, creating rails where an entire industry got created. It could be a lot of corporates who actively now invest in these startups and create newer and newer forms of collaboration. At Zetwerk, at least our firm belief has been that a lot of these institutions have been around for a really long time, decades, some even centuries, and will be there for the next couple of decades and centuries, right? With the relatively newer kids on the block. And for us, it's very, very important that we continue to work with them rather than against them. And I think that's the philosophy with which we've been out in this space.
Right. Wonderful. I think that was a great contrasting perspective. I mean, of a startup working with startups and working with the ecosystem. Especially, we will come back on the thought around your own role and how do you see that. And I think it'll be good to pick your brains on that. Let's now shift gears, and before I come to you, let's get to Toyota. You know, again, another end of the spectrum. We're talking from Germany here to Japan. You've been in India for a long time, in Bangalore, in Karnataka. Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, very good evening to all of you. Wonderful backdrop set, the context was set today morning, and I think the discussion continues. I'm from Toyota Kirloskar Motors, and of course we belong to the global Toyota group. And what I'll do today is to bang on talk about the way in which we collaborate with the ecosystem with some actual examples. Intuitively, the auto industry is a very fertile ground for disruption, and disruption demands almost innovation and entrepreneurship. The industry is now facing what we popularly call as CASE: connected, autonomous, shared and electrified. And each of these forces standalone are powerful disruptors by themselves. But the beauty is they're all combining together and creating something which is completely unknown to an industry which is almost a century old. But today I will not talk about CASE. Let me talk about a very interesting phenomenon coming out of CASE, which is about mobility. And I'll bring out some examples by which in this particular space as Toyota, we have kind of looked at collaborating with the ecosystem. So for those of you who are not initiated into mobility, today the entire concept of owning a car, we produce cars, we sell cars, people own cars. But the way in which the customer mood is shifting and changing globally, not just in India, is that of course you can own a car or an automobile, but the whole point is you need to get a mobility experience, and your requirement for mobility as a service, it could be recreational, it could be for work, it could be for weekend, needs to be available to the customer in a very present way. Which is where the industry has to move from selling a car or an automobile product to selling an experience as a service. So we have a global entity called the Toyota Mobility Foundation, headquartered out of Japan. And they run pilot projects all across the globe on the mobility domain. And one such project was run in India, in Bangalore, and I'll just throw some light on it. So before I just come to the project itself, let me throw some numbers at you. Most of you being in Bangalore will be aware, but on an average, on the work commute, the average speed per hour during a blend of peak, non-peak hours is about 18 kilometers per hour. That's it. That will give you a sense of the traffic density that we have. Now juxtapose this with the fact that only 18 to 20% of work commute involve using a public mode of transport directly or indirectly. That, along with the remaining 80% of the people who commute using a non-public transport, 90% of the trips are less than 10 kilometers, and almost 80% of the trips are less than 5 kilometers. And this in turn throws up the enormous mismatch that we have, wherein on one hand you need micro mobility, and on the other we talk about cars, engines, and a public transport which is not optimally utilized. So with the Toyota Mobility Foundation, along with Namma Metro, with the World Resource Institute, WRI, the Ross Institute, and with 80 startups, we decided to work on the last mile connectivity project on a multimodal mobility theme. This was of course a project. And out of 80 teams which kind of raised hands, 24 interesting solutions came up, and finally 4 solutions were actually prototyped and a project was executed. I'm not going to the detail of the project given the time constraint, but this kind of shows how the collaborative system works, ecosystem. Similar project was executed in Mumbai, again with the same set of players, Mobility Foundation, Toyota Mobility Foundation, Mumbai Metro Regulatory Development, Metro Rail, to look at how we can manage crowds. And there again, 2 very interesting startups gave solutions which were cornering around or talking about using employee shuttle bus as a service and using artificial intelligence to work towards a throughput model on crowd. Similar STAMP project. These projects are called STAMP projects, which are about station activity mobility programs. And we are executing such programs in Hyderabad and Kochi. So this is just one example. I have many more, but maybe let's hear with the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapnesh. I think you made a very strong case for a collaborative ecosystem with the example that you just shared. That's terrific. Chiradeep, over to you. I think it's, again, a very interesting perspective from a mobility standpoint that AG&P Pratham is working on. I think you can try that on. It should work. Yeah, it's working.
Thank you, Madan. I think it's working out.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative process. So, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. And I have to tell this before I start that this is one of the most brilliant set of discussions because people sitting here on this panel, are coming from different worlds. I mean, looking at the world, and yet it's such a collaborative process that there is a huge opportunity to use each other's experience and get on with it and make this entire thing a much better and a much more effective solution going forward. I also would almost commit a crime if I don't have a word of praise for the Government of Karnataka. They have really organized this very well. My name is Chiradeep Datta. I am the Chief Operating Officer of AG&P Pratham. And I would like to first of all tell what AG&P stands for. So ours is a 120-year-old company. We are based in Southeast Asia in Singapore. We have a few investors. We are first of all a 100% FDI, and our investors include I-Squared Capital, a private equity firm from the United States, and also we have Osaka Gas, which is the largest city gas distribution company in Japan, and we are actively using their experience. We also, of course, AG&P is there. Also, we have Japan Overseas Investment Corporation, which is actively supporting us. Here in India, we have authorization in 35 districts of this country, which covers about 8% of India's area and about 9% of India's population. And our sole motto and our sole vision is to make affordable natural gas available to all sectors of the economy, which includes the household sector, the industrial sector, the commercial sector, and the transportation sector, the mobility sector that my distinguished co-panelists have just talked about. If we talk of energy, and energy is something no one can deny, is what keeps all of us running, the wheels of the industry running. And India, as it is poised today, has a huge appetite for energy, and there is no denying that. And in this space, we have a toehold or a foothold for everyone, whether it's the conventional ones like coal or hydroelectricity, which is not going anywhere, although the vision of the Government of India is to increase the share of the renewables from whatever they are to a much about tripling or quadrupling that number. Also, the natural gas vision for the Government of India is to go from the current percentage of 6% to 15%. But it's the appetite of this gigantic economy is such that there is space for everyone. And so what we are in fact trying to do here in Karnataka, let me talk of Karnataka and then I'll come to the rest of the country. We are laying about 5,000 kilometers of polyethylene pipelines and having a vision for connecting 5 million households, natural gas on the tap. We have this vision of connecting, having CNG stations, about 600 of them within this state. We currently have about 60 of them, going to make it about 10-fold. Now, CNG is something which is for city travel or moving within a small space. We also have this vision of putting LNG in long haul buses, in trucks, on routes from, say, from Bangalore to Mumbai or from Bangalore to Hyderabad to Calcutta. So these routes today, it's not possible to service them on LNG because we simply don't have enough LNG dispensing facilities across this. So this is one area which we are actively focusing on. Now Karnataka has a huge coastline and ours, of course, in addition to Karnataka, we have sufficient coastline in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And we are focusing on converting the boats, the fishing trawlers that ply into the seas every morning and come back after, say, 7 days, 15 days, depending upon the size and the capacity of the boats, to convert them into LNG, which these boats today are all dependent on subsidized fuel like kerosene and diesel, which besides being polluting fuels are also something which also takes a lot of government's money in form of subsidies. So that is one area where we are focusing on. So that's about our vision. So all of this, so when it comes to the collaborative process that we are talking of and that remains to be the focus, is that this cannot be done by one entity or one company alone. This requires huge support, both in terms of technology and in terms of actually delivering various kinds of products. A simple example, 5,000 kilometers of pipeline. How are you going to have a surveillance on that? Can you have people walking on those 5,000 kilometers every single day? It's simply not possible. We can't do it without imbibing technology, without having drones to survey these areas. So this is one area where we would be looking actively at young entrepreneurs and technologists to come in and help us out. The second thing that we were also actively looking at is that if trucks and buses and cars and are to be converted into LNG or boats, we need retrofitters to be there. So where are these people going to come from? These are going to come from young entrepreneurs who have this zeal and work day in and day out to have this achieved. Also, the metering, we are going to have micro metering of gas to individual households, which we don't need hundreds and thousands of people flying into 5 million households and collecting the meter reading. So we have to have them connected over a SCADA system and getting it converted, the meter readings converted and getting into the households, getting into the control center for automatic billing and all. So that's another area that we are looking in for collaboration from people. So that's the space, and I think this is very interesting and exciting. So I will come on.
Thank you, Chiradeep. I think that's the range of possibilities that you painted. I'm sure we'll have a lot of minds buzzing in terms of what we can do. Let's move to the next part in terms of, I think maybe we'll cover two aspects. You can choose to pick one or more. One is for all the young and the old and the entrepreneurs in this gang. If you were to peer into the future from your vantage point and say, hey, here are the interesting opportunities that we see in this space. So if you are a startup and if you're an entrepreneur, here are the possibilities that you can consider. So we just spoke about a few of them and on similar lines. The second question that I want you to think about also is that, Bangalore and Karnataka as an ecosystem, as a collaborative ecosystem, assume that you had all the powers and there were no resource constraints or whatever. What is the one thing that we must do together to be able to turbocharge where we are, right? Any suggestion that you wish to make? So maybe Venkatesh, we can start with you, then come to Swapnesh.
I go for the first one first and paint a slightly broader picture. For a lot of the startup folks who are there in the audience, right, I'm a firm believer that if you take 5 smart people and put them in a room with a hard problem, they're bound to come up with a solution, right? But something that I've also learned and figured is the minute you're able to give them access to people who are in the industry, who have domain expertise, they're able to come up with a much better solution, right? And I think that's where the power of collaboration sort of comes from. Something we've seen in our world is we've almost always believed firmly in partnering with companies that exist out there. And the reason we do that is while startups bring in a lot of technological know-how, you may bring in a lot of agility, you may bring in a lot of human capital, but then there are corporates out there who've been there, done that. And being able to sort of intermingle both, and these corporates come with deep domain expertise, they've been able to see scale at levels that you're not yet there, right? And you can't even imagine sort of problems that come in, right? And they have access to markets which are very deep. Putting both of these skill sets together, I think, is what has helped us specifically in identifying opportunities in this sort of jugalbandi or combination. And when you look at these opportunities, and given I'm on the other side, I won't call out specific opportunities, but that are there where startups can participate. But how does a startup look at a corporate and identify opportunities, right? I'll flip that around from my perspective. I think there are a couple of ways in which we all can go about thinking about it. One of them obviously is financial, right? Where you look at a financial partnership. A lot of corporates these days are very welcoming. They have their own venture funds, or there are family in their professional capacities, or there are promoters in their personal capacities who have family offices. We heard Guru speak about Bosch investing in a bunch of startups. Similarly, you look at the Datta group, you look at Heroes. They've all done their bit in terms of contributing and partaking in the ecosystem and investing in ventures out there as corporate venture capitalists and partaking in the entire ecosystem and helping those. So as startups, I think that's one large opportunity that sort of comes out. The other opportunity is when you look at something strategic. I spent some time on the finance side of the world, on the fintech side, and I think how fintechs have collaborated with banks is another beautiful scenario that's been painted out. Whether you look at the payments industry today or the lending industry, they're basically collaborations that sort of bloomed into creating massive opportunities for the world out there. So that's one area of sort of partnership that comes out again as startups when you look at corporates. The third area would be, say, project-based or more tactical. I've seen a lot of corporates having a lot of ideas, but constrained to implement because of their own set of challenges. It could be approvals, it could be budget, it could be non-prioritizing something in the larger scheme of things. And this is where a startup who operates in a similar domain can come up, pick up the challenge and say, hey, let me do it for you. And if that works out, suddenly in the corporate, you not only have your biggest backer, you probably also have an anchor customer and maybe also an investor. Right? So these opportunities have panned out significantly and they've done wonders for a lot of startups out there. And I think the last is where you look at corporates as customers or suppliers. A lot of startups depend on large companies as a significant pool of supply or a significant customer base. For us, the Tattas, the L&Ts, the JSWs of the world have been anchor customers who helped us spearhead a bunch of products and growth. And I think it's a process to be able to earn their trust. At first, obviously there is doubt because you've not been there, done that. But I think you slowly work your way up the chain and eventually build trust by delivering on value on the outcome time and again. So for each startup, it becomes very important to be able to identify partnerships. Don't look at them en masse. I think every startup, depending on its maturity, stage of evolution that is there, needs to identify the right partner. There has to be a lot of individualization to the way you look at those partnerships. They take a lot of effort, they take a lot of nurturing. And once you've been able to identify the right partner, look at a holistic approach and go in for it. I think that's how, as a startup, we've looked at collaborating with companies and we've leveraged that to our advantage, and I think a lot of them.
Thank you, Anil. That was excellent advice and a very structured set of points. I think a lot of us need to make notes of this. Of course, we are recording this, we'll put this up on YouTube later, but appreciate the comments. Maybe Swapnesh, can we get to you on the...
Let me deal with both of them.
Okay.
Starting with which are the areas which hold potential. So there is this concept about hyperlocal, right? And if you look at the current startup thinking, we need to take a big problem and then offer a use case, solve it, and build the next unicorn, and that's great. But the way we see opportunities going forward, and I talk from personal example, wherein what we did in India, Toyota Kirloskar Motor India. I also had corporate planning, so I got all my function heads together. I told them, tell me 4 or 5 problem statements that you have within your company. It could be a small irritation, it could be something big. We picked these up. We went to IIT Madras and a few other places. We also tied up with MyNews database. And then we opened up these problem statements to a bunch of startups. And this is where, like exactly was pointing out, as startups, you might have an innovative solution, but you may not have an idea as to where you can match it. I think that's where the industry collaboration comes. And the need to go hyper industry, hyper local, go hyper industry. For example, in automobile, I now have a use case for the blockchain technology, not because it's a fancy technology, but because it solves an inherent problem that I had about parts traceability, right? And once we develop this use case, it can then be scaled up across multiple industries. So these are some of the areas where I believe if you look very closely at an industry, you'll find plenty of use cases and then you can scale them up in the going forward. That's the first one. Secondly, how we can turbocharge. Here I've got a couple of thoughts which kind of, not exactly turbocharging, but I believe this is something that we need to completely systemize the entrepreneurship culture. The first point is today, startups, the innovative thinking is still very urban centric. But with the Shark Tanks of the world coming out, you are seeing more and more potential in tier 1, tier 2. I think that is where we now need to go down, create a collaborative ecosystem, and the kind of problem statements they have and the innovation that they have may not be very tech heavy, but has got a lot of potential. I think this is one area where we can bring the second layer of turbocharging. Equally important, today if you look at the kind of ecosystem which is there, you have college students who are already actively looking at ideas. But if you look back in the 15th, 16th century, India was one of the biggest GDP contributors globally. That spirit of entrepreneurship, that culture, mindset about being entrepreneurially positive should come down to the school level. And I think Karnataka can offer a fertile ground if our students forget about jobs, right? I think this is where the 5 trillion economy has to be created by us. You can't expect government to create jobs which in turn will fund. And that can happen when we institutionalize innovation and entrepreneurship. And lastly, corporates have a role. The way we engage with MSMEs, I believe not just funding for risk capital. We should go out there and actively take services as customers and pay them for what they are worth. I believe a combination of this collaboration can bring a lot of positive momentum on the ground.
Beautiful. I was feeling like loudly cheering, standing and saying, hey, way to go, because I think what you said are something very dear to my heart about mass entrepreneurship. That it cannot be islands of excellence in a Bangalore or a Madan or a Mumbai. Right? We should have entrepreneurship sprout up in each and every village, solving local problems and being job creators, not just one person entities, but if we can create 5 or 10 jobs each, and if together we can create 10 million entrepreneurs who can create 10 jobs each, we've solved the jobs challenge that we face in the country. So echo with your thoughts. Chiradeep, let's get to you before I get to Guru on the ecosystem side.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts coming out from this panel. I will be a bit more direct while answering this question.
Absolutely.
The first question is that what would be one idea that should be taken up by the entrepreneurs or the startups? I come from an oil and gas industry, and therefore safety to me is paramount. And there is a huge world of opportunity in the field of safety, especially in the oil and gas industry. Of course, safety goes beyond oil and gas. One thing that we do, and we do it in a mass scale, is to transport a lot of products, whether it's LNG, CNG, whatever, transportation of gas through pipelines. And one thing that repeatedly comes to my mind is that in India we do not have sufficiently stringent safety standards, and therefore implementation of lot of safety norms which come out from the international standards are not that strict. But anyway, be it as it may, we believe in safety, and all our movements of goods and products have to be done through a very stringent safety approved or safety instrumented systems, which brings me to the topic of logistics management. And there is a world of opportunity for startups to work in this field and deliver systems, maybe not the whole spectra, but at least a part of the spectra in terms of delivering these highly hazardous and highly inflammable products from the port terminals, from where they are imported, to the hinterland. It can be transportation of LNG on a tanker, road tanker, or gas through a pipeline, or CNG on caskets moving on the roads. Each of them can be, if we have a very defined and intricate safety system which is online, where we can actually have this logistics movements tracked and corrected as something online, then this will be a big help both to this country as well as to the road. And this is not done. I mean, advanced countries have their own methods. At least most of this part of India, we do not have this, and this is a huge opportunity. The other thing, as I talked about sometime back, about drones coming in and playing, and we have huge restrictions today because drones can't go here, there's a defense establishment here and there. But if someone can map that out and then have these drones used in surveillance of our pipelines and product lines and things like that, it will be a big help for this. So these are two ideas that I can think of at this point in time. And as other members of the panel said, that this has to come in the idea of the innovation, the idea of innovating should be there at the grassroots level, so that as one grows, as they are automatically adapting to the challenges and they can see the problem and look for solutions. Most of us have to be told what the problem is. The identification of the problem also is the onus lies with the entrepreneurs who are looking into these areas. Of course, people who are in the problem will be in the best position to tell the problem, but articulating that into something that can be worked out into a solution also lies with the people who are coming in. So that's what I have for.
A lot of food for thought out there. And just connecting to what you said about hyper local or hyper industry, and then you can replicate those solutions across so many verticals. Guru, over to you for your thoughts as we wind up on this panel.
Okay, thankfully you restricted it to my vantage point. Otherwise, I think we would have either overlaps or too many things which have been said.
Yeah.
So basically, when I constrain myself to mobility, the whole world of mobility is changing dramatically. The value chain is changing. There is going to be a lot of disruption as we move forward in how the car of the future or the vehicle of the future will look like. So that's basically an invitation for everybody technologically oriented to come in and participate and so on. So that's the number one thing. So big companies are in, like ours, like Toyota or Tesla, but also thousands of startups are in the area of mobility today to solve these problems. So a colleague from Toyota, Kirloskar, said he does not want to talk about the PACE elements, PACE being personalized, automated, connected and electrified. But these are the technologies which are sort of creating a confluence environment to build the next vehicle of the future. So there is a lot happening in each of these verticals, and so for each of them there is a need for many startups to come in, which has already happened, and they've been participating to make solutions come alive. One other area where I would say startups have a great role, and this sort of connects to our local environment a little bit, which is a little unfortunate that it's largely oriented to software. So, so far I think an area where India has not really taken off well is technology startups, which do products and solutions. So there we've largely been a fintech kind of an environment, or an environment where we've done a lot of platform related work or software. So there I think that actually helps us in this area. The car of the future or the vehicle of the future is not about how we can differentiate in terms of software. So it's now more or less getting defined as a software-defined vehicle. So a lot of software gets in, a lot of things can be built by very agile and good startups. And so that's an area where a huge amount of startup activity can happen. So I would say
as I was sharing that Venturize is not the end, it's the beginning. And what we have just done over the last 45-50 minutes is, I feel we barely scratched the surface. There's so much of depth that we can go, which I want to request each of you from Thai. We would love to host you for a more detailed discussion with a very curated set of startups to kind of go deeper into each of the areas, to kind of think through, collaborate, figure out how they can work together. So I'm putting you on the on the spotlight to say, hey, over the next few months, we'd love to get you and your colleagues together through the Thai, because Thai is all about how do you network, how do you get that industry-led mentoring, and how do you then laser-sharp focus on a problem statement which is worth solving, right? So with that, folks, I'm coming to the end of the panel, and I have to share that this is what I was afraid of, the usual statement, we've run out of time. We indeed have run out of time. Time's up, coming up in bold, red, white stuff there, and we have a very exciting panel coming up next. But let me promise you that in the spirit of collaboration, and I'm speaking on behalf of all of them, anybody, any startup that has an interesting idea, talk to us. We'll be able to help reach out to these gentlemen and their corporations so that you can have a more collaborative conversation. That's what we do at TIE. So with that, let me thank each of the panelists for a fascinating conversation. As I mentioned, this is the beginning. Picture abhi baki hai mere dost is the dialogue I want to leave you with. Thank you so much. Again, a huge round of applause for a fantastic kickoff to this Venturize segment.
Actually, as Bosch, we have an internal incubation program. It's called DNA. So startups are actively coming in, and we select, nurture, provide them scale-up opportunities, connect them with our technology, work with them. So feel free to connect.
Wonderful.
Thank you, dear panelists and Madan. That was a wonderful discussion, which basically brought about how startups can look at hyper-localization, can look at quality control, can look at maintaining the security aspects of their operations, and also being very creative in the way they collaborate, the kind of financial terms that they have. So all in all, very productive discussion, and we'd like to thank our sponsors and as well as the speakers with little tokens of, one is a Thai memento and the other one is a coffee box which is generously given by the coffee board. So thank you so much, that was a wonderful discussion.